Bryson Gordon, News in Advance, talking to me about the Liberty Flames. He saw the win over New Mexico State on Tuesday. I'll ask pretty simply, what'd you think?
Yeah, I think this is a crazy Liberty team. Everybody that asks me about them, I think you just kind of have to throw out all of your expectations for Liberty in general, and just kind of quote unquote enjoy the ride this season. I think we've kind of seen this team, right? They've gone up against James Madison and Old Dominion, two really talented teams, and it looked like they didn't necessarily have the same talent level. That doesn't matter in Conference USA play, and I think in Conference USA they have an opportunity to compete, for that second spot, and maybe, even get up into one of those top two spots to get in the Conference USA championship game. But it's going to be hectic. It's going to be crazy because I don't think this is a Liberty team like the last couple that you could kind of pencil in as being, more talented on paper than every team they face in the league. And so I think people that can throw their hands up and just enjoy the ups and downs of this season are going to have a lot more fun than the people that came into the season for Liberty football talking about playoffs and talking about this and that. I think those are long gone dreams, obviously. But there are still things that this team can reach. I mean, they're clearly after even more craziness in Conference USA last night. They're still pretty clearly in the race for the second spot to get into the conference championship game. I know it's early with 5 games left, but they're still in the thick of it. And I think with the way that they've looked in the last couple of games, it hasn't been pretty. But if they can just get wins, right, that's all that matters. And a lot of the players kind of said that after the game on Tuesday.
What's funny at the end of the day, I mean, I think obviously people out there are going to look at spreads. I know writers don't do that. I mean, do writers look at like who's a favorite type of thing?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I always keep an eye on the odds. I think it's important because, I mean, in Liberty's case, they were 9.5 point favorites against UTEP, or excuse me, against New Mexico State on Tuesday. You tell me, is there any team in college football that you could safely say you think Liberty's 10 points better than? I mean, I don't, I've watched Liberty play a lot this year. I don't think there's any teams. And so that's why I like to keep an eye on it to see what Vegas thinks, to see what, people who are putting their money on it think.
Right.
And it gives a good gauge of what I think to expect in a lot of these games. And obviously, Liberty didn't cover the other night.
Yeah, and with that being said, Liberty was ahead, then they got behind, then they had to kind of come back and get the win, and I think that makes people worry. But at the end of the day, you mentioned it. Throw your hands up, enjoy the ride. A win is a win. How does it matter how you get it?
Exactly. And I think for this team, because of their situation with their goals that are on the table, right? If this was at the beginning of the season and there were still, outside hopes that this was a Liberty team that could maybe make a playoff run or maybe make a run to a New Year's Six like the team in 2023, then I would understand, right? People complaining about style points. Why isn't Liberty covering? Why aren't they winning by 15? Why aren't they winning by 11 to be able to cover the 10-point spread? All this kind of stuff. I understand, style points in that kind of argument. I think in the argument for what Liberty is going through right now is like, hey, like you said, a win's a win. Doesn't matter how you get it because, there's not style points in the Conference USA standings. And in reality, Liberty's chasing two goals, I think, in the rest of the season. And the players and coaches will tell you this. They're chasing bowl eligibility, and they're chasing, a spot in the Conference USA championship game. Those aren't You don't need style points to get into those two things like you need to get into the college football playoff or to get into that New Year's Six conversation. You just need wins. And as you know, I think it was Damon Harmon who had a pretty good game on Tuesday night against New Mexico State. He said post game, like he said, wins. A win doesn't matter if it's pretty. It doesn't matter if it's ugly. We just need to be in the win column. And if Liberty can somehow muster 5 or 6 wins in Conference USA play, they're 2-1 now. They could muster 5 or 6 wins in the league. They're going to have a case to be able to get into that second seed. It just depends on who they beat. Down the stretch, it looks like Jacksonville State's kind of separating themselves as the best team so far, but in other cases, I think Liberty is certainly in that conversation for that two spot. So it's going to be ugly at times. And I think anytime Liberty wins this year, it's going to be hard to see them kind of bulldozing past teams like we came accustomed to 2 years ago. But I think this team would take 1 point wins the rest of the way because if they were to win out, you can guarantee they're making a Conference USA championship game at this point.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I think, is for a team that I don't want to say had been as low as Liberty was, but for a team that was struggling with the win-loss record, I think wins are more important than style points, like you said.
Yeah, and it was a team. If you're a Liberty fan, I mean, think about how you were consuming this team at 1-4. A lot of people were calling it a lost season already, and so for the fact that it has gone from a quote unquote lost season at 1-4 to they've rattled off a couple wins. Like I said, you almost have to. If I was a fan of this team, I would throw my hands up and be like, all right, let's just see what this last month gives us. Obviously, they're off until November 1st, and they got their last 5 games in that stretch, so. I think it will be a crazy month of November, and I think if you're a fan, hoping and still, kind of wallowing in the 1-4 start, I think you're kind of missing the point here with what this team is trying to do. College football playoffs, I mean, one team from the group of five makes it every year. Those can't be your expectations going into the season. Now, certainly, I think, being in the Conference USA championship race should be the standard for Liberty on a year-to-year basis, given their resources, and, the Conference USA in general. And so I think, they're kind of in that hunt. I mean, it's early, they're 2-1, but they are in the hunt for the Conference USA championship game. And they can handle their own business and get there is what the deal is right now. So.
Two things, life advice by Bryson Gordon. If you don't get what you want, just throw your hands up and enjoy the ride for the rest of the way. But number
Yeah.
number two, after that, prophetic life advice that I'm going to take in my daily life. Number two, I think if you make the group of five once, then maybe that kind of becomes an expectation. I mean, true or false? I mean, it was a different regime though, too.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the 2023 team, right? Incredibly talented, a completely different level of talent than this one that Liberty has now. And that's not to bash the current coaching staff. Obviously, it was the same coaching staff that came in 2023, but it was really, it was a lot of players from Hugh Freeze's tenure, right? I mean, it was a pretty much Hugh Freeze's team. And now that's not once again to take credit away from Jamie Chadwell. I think Jamie Chadwell's offense, that season, particularly his kind of spread option scheme, it really unlocked the best parts of all of those Liberty weapons, right? They weren't 13-0 whenever Hugh Freeze was there, and that's something to note. And I think that's a feather in Chadwell's cap that he was able to get the most out of those guys. And so anybody that would tell you that the 2023 team was all Hugh Freeze is doing and Chadwell just came along, I don't think that's fair to what Chadwell's been able to do. But it is completely fair to sit there and say, that this is a much less talented team on paper than that squad was. But I mean, whenever you do stuff like that, it does become a little bit of the standard. And in Liberty's case, we live here in Lynchburg. We see the footprint of the campus, and we know a little bit about all the resources that they have. Like that is a program that should be, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, that they should be competing for the Conference USA championship on a year-to-year basis. It shouldn't be, a down year here or there. They have so much of an advantage over Conference USA teams. I think they should be competing in that space. But even their, advantage over the Conference USA teams, I don't think it sets them above, the groups of Memphis and Boise State and Tulane. I still think that they have a little bit of ways to go to reach the, I would say the standing that those teams have on a year-to-year basis in the G5.